Welcome back to Spiritwind. And as you remember, Spiritwind is a study group for spiritual adventurers. And that's why we're here today, to give you another episode of the things that we study in our study group. We do different topics every month. And this month, we're going to be talking about the story of Abelard and Heloise. But we want you to come and visit us when we have these study groups. We meet every Wednesday, 5:30, at Unity of Auburn, which is at 1212 High Street in Auburn. So without further ado, let's talk about what we studied in February, and then we'll go into what our topic is for the month of March. And with me today is our co-host, Rick Wright. He's a former minister and philosopher, and he helps us and guides us in these study discussions. So Rick, tell us about the month of February and the month of love.
For February, we looked at the story of Abelard and Heloise. It was a tragic love story of over the ages. Long before Romeo and Juliet we heard anything like that. There was Abelard and Heloise. And tragic love stories have been a theme throughout human history.
So how did we approach this topic?
Well, first of all, we looked at the word love itself. We looked at C.S. Lewis has a book called The Four Loves, and we looked at it. Where he shows what the four different words for love are in the Greek language, which is the New Testament is written in Greek.
So what are these four words?
Well, the first one is eros, from which we in English get the word erotic, but it doesn't necessarily mean erotic in the way we mean it. Eros in Greek simply means sensual love. It could mean a love of music, a love of fine food, just love of things, you know. The second word is storge, which is familial love or affection. Storge means is the love towards a family member, a natural affection, and neither eros or storge are really in the Bible. And then we come to the next word, which is philia, and that is in the Bible, which means, philia means brotherly love, as in the word Philadelphia.
The city of brotherly love.
The city of brotherly love. The last word is agape, which is selfless love. In the 1 Corinthians 13, the famous chapter on love in the New Testament, which talks all about love, and you see that in new translations, but in the King James, they don't even use the word love. They use the word charity instead, because charity is selfless. We give without any thought of getting anything in return, like when you give something to a poor person.
So now that we have these terms of love defined, where do we go from here?
Well, then we looked at some different tragic love stories. Mm-hmm. And I kind of went through history, and then we ended up focusing on Abelard and Heloise. So the first we looked at was the story of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, who Mark Antony and Cleopatra he was a famous Roman general, and she was the queen of Egypt, and they had a passionate, decade-long political and romantic alliance with the Rome that ended up leading to war and led up to them committing suicide together in 30 BCE. The next one we see sounds very much like an Arthurian myth. It's called Tristan and Isolde. We're talking the 12th century. It was a medieval Celtic legend often associated with the Arthurian myth, that has a Cornish knight by the name of Tristan and an Irish princess named Isolde, who fall in love after drinking a love potion, and their forbidden romance leads to tragedy because Isolde was already promised to the king, King Mark, and of course, I'm sure he didn't like that too much, but it ended up tragically. Of course, I mentioned Romeo and Juliet, which is in the 16th century by Shakespeare. It's not a true story, but it's a story that has a lot of truth in terms of it's the kind of story that happens over and over again, where families try to keep their kids apart because they don't want them marrying out of their own clan. Then we look at Soren Kierkegaard and Regina Olsen in the 19th century. Soren Kierkegaard was a philosopher in Denmark, and they lived in Copenhagen. And after a deeply passionate and romance, he proposed in 1940, but later, because he felt he was, the term they used in those days was melancholy, they used that word instead of what we would say today, clinically depressed. Not just depressed, but clinically depressed. And he was afraid that if he went through and married her, it would ruin her life the way he was. And so he, out of supposedly sacrifice, he gave up his relationship with her to protect her. The last one we looked at, and another one was in 19th century, is Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. They had an intense 22-year marriage from 1840 to 1861. It was passionate, oftentimes volatile, but then Prince Albert dies of typhoid, and at the age of 42, and which devastates Victoria, and she enters at that point into a 40 years of deep mourning, where she wore black for the rest of her life.
Well, can you tell us about Abelgard and Heloise then, and so we get a feel for their tragic story?
Yeah, Abelard and Heloise, that was in the 12th century, and is a tragedy of brilliant minds and forbidden love and scandal and forced separation, all kinds of stuff. What happened was Peter Abelard was one of the greatest theologians and philosophers of the time and taught at the University of Paris. And Heloise was a very educated woman for her time, and her uncle wanted to get her to take Abelard and use him as a tutor to teach his niece philosophy and theology, something that girls never learned in those days. So she was a real exception. However, what ended up happening, their relationship became more intimate until it ended up with him getting her pregnant. They tried to do a secret marriage and have the child in private. But when the uncle finally found out what had happened, he had a bunch of men come and castrate Abelard. And so then, from then on, the two of them lived in different, she lived in a convent and he lived in a monastery, and their relationship continued on only in passionate letters. And we read some of those letters in class and so forth.
What happened to their child?
Apparently, the child was taken up by family members that took care of them, and I'm sure they had times where they could see him. It was a boy that they had, astrolabe, which is a device for looking at the stars. Anyway.
Okay, so then what are we going to do with all this information?
Well, I gave an assignment to the class. We're going to see how that turns out. For them to look at their own lives and see in their life, have they had any tragic or failed or unrequited love that's happened in their lives? And are they willing to share it?
Oh.
In front of other people? Well, maybe we've had more than one, so you can pick the one that's the least problematic for you to share. But anyway, that's what we did.
Okay, so studying these unrequited loves or tragic love stories, what type of thing did you want us to take from these stories?
Well, I think the thing that we can take forward is a sense of how human nature has not changed in hundreds and even thousands of years. More than this, we can see that romantic love can get us into trouble. When we are in love, rather than we just love someone when we're, quote, in love, our intellect seems to disengage. And we can end up seeing that death would be better than to live without the one who we are romantically involved with. So those are things to think about.
Well, that's a hard one to think about. But we're going to continue to discuss this for the month of February, and then we're going to go right into March. So what do we have in March?
Well, we're officially going to be, we officially already are in Lent.
Oh, okay.
Because Ash Wednesday was earlier this week. So we're going to be talking about Easter, for one thing, and then we're going to talk about the Atonement. And I'll get to that more in a moment, but the Atonement is the term that is used by Christians to explain what Christ's death accomplished on the cross.
Okay. Okay.
And an easy way to look at it is atonement is an English word just made up. It's a made-up word.
Oh, made-up word?
Yeah,
Okay.
that means at one meant.
Oh, at one meant. Okay.
Yeah, that's all it means. And it means that the atonement is how God becomes one, or we become God with once again after we have been separated.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so the first thing that I want to point out is that there are two Easters celebrated every year. One is the religious version, as portrayed in the Gospels and celebrated in Christian churches. But then there's a secular version with the Easter bunny and Easter baskets filled with chocolate eggs and candies and ham for dinner. What in the world do the two have to do with each other? If you just saw Easter bunnies and that, you'd never guess it had anything to do with
No.
Christianity. Yeah.
So, since the title of the class is Easter and the Atonement, I guess this means that we'll be looking at the religious aspects
Well, actually,
of Easter.
yeah, we're going to look at the religious, and then we're going to look at the secular, where that came from too. So, this being the case, you can tell that the word atonement means in relationship to Easter. Both the Greek and the Hebrew word for atonement are often obviously different. because one's Greek and one's Hebrew.
Right.
In Hebrew, the word is kafar, and it's a verb. It means literally to cover or to purge or to make reconciliation. That's their word for atonement.
Uh-huh.
And the Greek word is hilaskomai, which is often translated to make atonement or propitiation or to be merciful.
Okay, so the Greeks and the Hebrews had a word, but then the English just made up a word to try to encompass what they were trying to say.
Right.
Okay, so we didn't just use parts of those older words and make it an English word. We made up a whole different word.
Yeah,
okay.
And there are many times that we have English words. Well, you'll see a little when we get to Easter, how this works. But sometimes we take the actual word and they call it anglicizing.
Right. So that's what I was
But these aren't anglicized. These are like totally different words, So in Greek, the word for Easter is Pascha. And this word appears 29 times in the New Testament and is translated Passover. That's the real word, Passover.
Okay.
And that's because they referred back when they did Passover, the lamb was called the Paschal Lamb. And so Easter was supposed to be, the word Easter isn't really, it's in Acts 12:4 of the King James Version, but it's translating the word Pascha.
Oh, okay. All right. So then where did the word Easter come from?
Well, why don't you explain this?
Well, I know that the word Easter, when we look back at the Anglo-Saxon type of history, that we see a Germanic goddess of spring named Estere or Ostara. And so with that, over time, I think the Christian holiday just took over the pagan month of Estora, which was celebrated. And so Estore or Ostara was used by 8th century monk, Bebe, and he attributed the name to the Anglo-Saxon goddess of spring and fertility, who was honored with festivals mostly in the month of April, but I guess Easter in the Christian lineage can come in March or April.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So then also there's a Sturamonath, an Old English, and that refers to the term later used for the Christian resurrection.
Yeah.
And celebrating and blending seasonal fertility related and new religious meanings. So spring and fertility, new eggs, rabbits, things like that are coming in spring. So
they blended them together.
Right. So they're blending them together.
Yeah. So now that we've explained those terms, let's look at, there are what are known as 3 different theories of the atonement, meaning how did the fact that Jesus died on the cross do anything other than a guy died on a cross? Why should it affect us? Well, the first theory is called the ransom theory. ransom theory is, according to this theory, Satan has taken us all hostage and demands a ransom from God. And the ransom he's saying is the death of Jesus. And meaning, look, I've got all these people held hostage. Unless you have Jesus killed, I won't let you have them, you know. And it was a view that dominated from the second to the 11th century. But I actually think it's kind of absurd that God would have to bargain with Satan.
Yeah.
Why does he have to make a deal with Satan? He can just say whatever he wants to say.
And so this was a Christian view,
Right.
then. Yeah, okay.
Then the next one is the substitutionary atonement. And this theory was developed in the 11th century by St. Anselm. And it states that Jesus was our substitute in death. Jesus died the death we deserved so that we could live the eternal life that he deserved. So that's kind of like the switcheroo.
The substitutionary
Jesus
atonement.
is our substitute.
Yes.
He died in our place.
Okay.
Then there's one last one, which is actually developed in the 11th century by Peter Abelard.
Oh, who we just talked about,
in
yeah.
the last
With
lesson.
the tragic love story, yeah.
Yeah, he was a younger contemporary of Anselm who came up with the substitutionary atonement theory. And he stated that the significance of the cross is not that we were taken hostage and God paid the ransom, or that Jesus was our substitute and we got his eternal life and he got our death, but rather this is called the moral influence theory, and it teaches that the theory states that what was significant about the cross was that it was a demonstration of God's love for us, a love that would not even spare his own son. And supposedly it's supposed to draw us to God. The love of God expressed in that is supposed to draw us to God. But, to me, it doesn't seem to look like a very loving God that would allow his son to be killed when he could have easily stopped it. In fact, why not stop Satan instead of Jesus and save us all a whole lot of grief?
Well, now that we've looked at these different types of atonement, can you tell us how the secular version of Easter became part of our cultural celebrations?
Well, it happened this way with a number of holidays. First, it happened with Christmas. Christmas was originally on December 20. Well, for us, it's on December 25th, but it originally fell on the winter solstice according to the old Roman calendar. And on the winter solstice, there were all sorts of religious festivals going on in the Roman Empire because a lot of them worshiped the sun. And it meant this is the end of darkness, and now the sun was going to be coming back for the year. And then when they changed the calendar to the Gregorian calendar, the winter solstice no longer falls on the 25th, but they kept 25th. Now, they did that because they were trying to bring in people. When they celebrate Christmas and the birth of Jesus, that was a way to entice people that were already celebrating on that day to shift their allegiance to Jesus rather than the gods and goddesses they were worshiping. But after the Germanic people brought down Rome, the fall of Rome, when the church founded the celebration of Easter, it was celebrated around the time that the Germanic people celebrated the spring equinox, and it found a way to speak to the Germanic people by adopting many of the customs of the church, such as Easter lilies, Easter bunnies, ham for dinner, both rabbits and pork were considered unclean according to the Torah. So it's kind of strange that those things would have got mixed in, you know. So that's happened. We did the same thing. We did a holiday around the time those people were already celebrating to help make the transition from their religion to Christianity.
Well, are there any evidence that the pagans celebrated with Easter eggs or anything like that? Or did they decorate things at all?
Well, like I said they had things like Easter lilies and the reason why, you think, what does a rabbit have to do with Easter?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't. Well, it does have to do with Easter, but it doesn't have anything to do with the death of Jesus.
Right.
Rabbits are symbols of fertility, and the goddess Ostara, that the Germanic people worshipped, was a fertility goddess. So eggs and bunnies and all these things were symbols of fertility.
So I'm wondering how we got started with decorating the Easter eggs. That would be a good.
Well, I think it's a way that a lot of people, for instance, in our culture, there's a lot of people that aren't Christian,
Right.
And it gives them. We have a secular version of Christmas with Santa Claus and snowmen and all that.
Right.
And then we have a secular version of Easter with Easter bunnies and all that.
Right.
So it gives people something to celebrate at that same time of the year without being accepting of that religion.
Okay. All right. Well, we will definitely do a lot more of this discussion. Is there anything that people should study beforehand, before they come to the class, if they'd like to?
Well, they could read up on the origin of Easter.
Okay.
That would be a good thing to do. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll have our study groups, as I mentioned before. They happen every Wednesday night at 5:30 at 1212 High Street, Unity of Auburn. And just come and be a part of the discussion. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. If you have interesting points to bring up, those are always welcome. Everyone is welcome to come. There's no charge. Rick is our leader, and we have a lively discussion. Everyone is welcome to put their 2 cents in. So please join us at 5:30. And I wanted to thank you again, Rick, for all of these interesting topics that we're discussing every month. We have a new one, and we'll be continuing with our series.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.